Let's talk about what you're doing wrong when it comes to forecasting. It is March 1st. It is the last month of the first quarter for many of you who run on a calendar year. It might be the second month of your new fiscal year if you run on a fiscal year that starts on February 1st. Let's talk about everybody's favorite topic, forecasting, and what you're doing wrong or what you might be mismanaging. What is a forecast? A forecast is a prediction of something that might happen in the future. It is not going to be 100% accurate. There's no possible way for it to be 100% accurate unless you happen to have a car that was built in the 80s, made out of stainless steel. Watch Back to the Future if you don't know what I'm getting at. No spoiler alerts. Forecasting is really, really hard. It's really hard to do. Accuracy of forecast should be better the closer you get to the timeline for which you're forecasting. So let's talk about an annual forecast. First thing we have is Q1, then we have Q2, we have Q3, and we have Q4. Now, sometimes you'll work in businesses where the money that you generate in each quarter ends up getting bigger as you get toward the end of the year. It depends on the seasonality of your specific business, and that'll kind of factor into things as you start to think about stuff. But we've got Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. By this point in time, the accuracy of my forecast for Q1 should be pretty good. So Q1, we should be pretty good right now. The reason we should be pretty good right now is each of those deals that we're working on or probably have paperwork that's exchanged hands. Someone's waiting for doing some things for a signature, or you might be working through final red lines, something like that. Depends on how your business operates. Now, if your business doesn't have long sales cycles, has really short sales cycles, maybe the sales cycles are one call or they're day to day or they're a couple of days, your numbers are going to vary a little bit. What I'd like you to start to think about is how does this apply in the context of short term, medium term, and long term? So in the short term, we've got our Q1 forecast, this kind of current 90-day period. In the medium term, we've got our do I have a job forecast, the one for the year. And then the long term, this is where things are really going to blow your mind. I want you to start to think about next 90 plus 270, 90 plus 270, always starting to look out. That's some context for the forecasting discussion. I know that if you're struggling with forecasting, this is going to be interesting to you. Let's think about what our timeline is. That's the first variable, timeline. That comes from our expected close date. And again, when we're talking about expected close dates, unless you're the one who's actually going to sign the deal on behalf of the customer, it's really hard to be 100% accurate on these close dates. So sales leaders, give your team a little bit of grace. We're kind of playing, we're forecasting, we're using all of the information. Understand that sometimes close dates go further out and sometimes close dates get pulled back in. If you're a rep, though, who keeps pushing your close dates out further, come on, what are you doing? Who are you fooling? You're just kind of kicking things out, kicking the can down the line. Apply some decision-making criteria and determine whether or not that deal is really a deal. So the first thing we want to understand is close date. Once we understand close date, then we have some understanding of where things are going to land in the forecast. The second thing that we want to know is amount. This is one of those ones I see people screw up all the time. This is a dollar figure, or if you're in the UK, you could still draw that pound sign. This money amount is one of those things where people will start to kind of play around with what they're forecasting and maybe sandbag a number in there. Be careful about that. If you're messing around with the amount number in your forecast, and you're trying to play the number game, all you're going to do is throw off the next thing, which gets into probability of sale based on stage. So put real numbers in there. Based on the discussions that you've had, what is an accurate representation of the financial number that deal might be at the time when it closes? So this is going to be that first deal when it closes. Or it might be a renewal. Those end up being a lot easier because we know what the renewal dates are. The new business side, this stuff can get a little bit harder to do. Again, back to forecasting. I want to know time. So close date, number one. I want to know amount, number two. This is going to go up or down. Close dates will go in or out. And then the last thing, if I was to highlight one of the biggest challenges with forecasting that happens inside organizations, this third one is the biggest one. It is about stage. So stage. Why is stage important? Stage is important because if you've got an accurate definition of what your stage is, and I like to use past tense, I like to have exit criteria, so the things have already passed through that stage. Remember, stages, things can go back and forth. It's kind of like chutes and ladders. But stage I like to use past tense. And when we have a clear definition of what the single question is that we need to answer, yes or no, and whether or not we're out of that stage, we'll be in a position where we can start to do a really good job in estimating probability of sale. So what's the percent likelihood that that deal is going to get closed? We've got close date, number 1. We've got amount, number 2. And then we've got stage, number 3. 3, 2, 1, 3 different variables that impact forecasting. Now, this is why forecasting in the short term is going to be a bit more accurate. Over the long term, you're going to have to kind of squint a little bit. It's going to be a little bit tougher. If you are clear on your stage definitions, you understand what those exit criteria, and you follow my recommendation on using past tense, and you have a standard probability of sale that you apply for each of those stages, maybe give your team a little bit of flexibility where they can write in or they can change. You have a standard probability of sale based on the data that you have inside your organization. You will get better at forecasting if you have these 3 numbers: stage, accurate amount, and close date. Now, as a reminder, the accurate amount is the size of the deal. So as an example, if I've got a $200K deal and I'm at a stage where the probability is 50%, for me, that would be client fit confirmed. So fit confirmed at 50%. Okay. So we're still doing some other things that we need to do in there relative to getting the solution in place, but we've got client confirmed fit. We're at 50% at 200K. I would be forecasting 100K on that deal. And if it's going to fall into Q4, I would be forecasting 100K. I would have 200K in pipeline, and I would have my forecast relative to pipeline would be 50%. And I think that's a key performance indicator to look at, is percentage of forecast relative to pipeline. And over time, what you'll find is there'll be a spectrum that you want to fit in. I know this is a long video. This is a bit complex. We're getting into how do we simplify our approach to forecasting. And here's the reality. Forecasting is hard. Forecasting is tough. The reason why your team sucks at forecasting, or you suck at forecasting, or your business sucks at forecasting, is because you either are off on your close dates, you're off on your amounts, or there's a lack of clarity around what your stage is. If you do not provide the flexibility for your team to move things in and out, move things up and down, move stages back and forth, your forecasting will always suck. If you'd like help, give me a call. All right. I'm back. I want to go a little bit deeper. So thanks for hanging out this long. I mean, you just watched 7.5 minutes of content around forecasting, and we hit on those 3 key variables. We hit on timing, we hit on amount, and we hit on stage. I want to go a little bit deeper, as I said I would in that LinkedIn post. We'll get into some questions, and I'm happy to answer direct questions if you have them. If you have something else that you'd like me to go into, or a specific example that you're running into within your team around how you do this. And one of the things that will typically come up, and this is a good place to kind of keep some notes, your stages can have the same stage name and definition for every part of your team. This could be for new customer acquisition, for retention, and for expansion. And I did that I've done that a couple of different times inside different organizations, where we use the same stage name in each of those instances from a sales process perspective. If you think that you need to have a different sales process for your new customer acquisition team versus your retention expansion team, you're doing it wrong. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have around that. Let's talk about the forecasting challenge. When it comes to things like stages, if the stage that you're using inside your sales process does not indicate an increased probability of sale once the deal has gone through it, then you're doing things wrong when it comes to stages. And here are the catalyst sales stages. Validation, call that 5%. Qualified, meaning that we identified that we understand the story from the customer's perspective, the problem that we're looking to solve. So qualified, again, all past tense, let's call that 25%. Fit, meaning based on what we know what the problem is, we can actually solve it. Let's call that 50%. That was an example I used in the video. Let's say confirmed fit from a client perspective is 60%. Proposal approved on the client side gets us to 80%, maybe even 90%. Let's just say 80%. And then closed won is 100%. That's a probability of sale. So on that 200K deal that I had mentioned at this early stage, 200K, we're only forecasting 10K at that stage. The 25% stage, we're forecasting 50K. At the 50% stage, we're forecasting 100K, and you can see how that works out. The reason I use past tense here, and this is something that It took me a little bit of time to realize, but once I did, it started to make much more sense. Once somebody goes through a gate, the probability of sale is increasing. If someone's stuck inside the gate, there's so many different things that can be happening in that stage that could either increase or decrease probability. So let's use past tense and have yes, no statements. And I'm happy to share examples of what those look like. Just send me a direct message and I can send you what we use from a catalyst sale stage perspective. I don't really care what the names are. What I care about more is the job to be done. And the job to be done from a forecasting perspective here is when something is in that stage, meaning it's qualified, or fit has been established, or fit has been confirmed. What's in that stage, the probability of that money turning into real money inside our organization is increasing. And over time, you'll understand what your percentages are for each of those stages. So in the instance when we talk about renewals, you might have renewal on the confirmed fit side be more like, heck, at qualified, it might be 75% because your renewal rates are that high, and proposal approved might be 90%, and then close one is 100%. And you can use the same language, and I would recommend you use the same language inside your organization because then you'll have consistency around how the team communicates with each other. And when you bring people outside of the sales team into those conversations with the customer, they'll understand what's happening at a given stage. And you can communicate this to your team. When you communicate to your engineering team or product team, then they get a sense for, oh, I get this. This is just like development stages that we have from a product development perspective. So you know what our stages are. We have clear definitions. The thing that I would suggest that you do in each of those stages is have a single yes, no statement or question, however you want to look at it, binary statement, yes, no question, closed-ended question around what the criteria is to exit each of those stages. So understand the story from the customer's perspective. Qualified. So we know what the problem is. We know why it's important to solve. We know how they're trying to solve it today. We know all these details. So we understand the story. It's account planning, problem solving from the client perspective. Yes or no? If yes, then now it's qualified. We're in that qualified stage. We've actually qualified it. So that's where we get to 25%. Based on our understanding of the story, these are catalyst definitions. Based on the understanding of the story, the problem that we need to solve for, we can actually solve for it with our current solution. Yes or no? If yes, now we're in fit. So now we're at 50%. Based on the customer's understanding of our solution, they believe we can solve for the problem inside their organization. Yes or no? If yes, now we're at client confirmed fit, so on and so forth. And again, I can lay those out for you. Just let me know. I've shared these publicly before. They're on the website. If you go to catalystsell.com, our primary website these days is findmycatalyst.com. But if you go to the old Catalyst Sell site, you'll see these stages. They're all past tense. The variables here, they're stages, number of stages. This one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we got confirmation at the end, confirmation. That's probably the most complex that you need it to be. Some other organizations may only have 4 stages as they go through it. That's fine. The variables are number of stages, definition of exit criteria, the yes-no statement to determine whether or not you've met the criteria to have passed that stage. Again, past tense, past that stage. So if we've already confirmed fit, that means we're working toward getting the proposal approved. Hope that makes sense. Right? Over time, what you'll start to do is get an understanding of what are these percentages that you can apply for probability of sale. And you can change those over time. You can start to change those by team. So let's say in a specific vertical of your business, your percentages are different than they are with another vertical. Retention expansion versus new customer acquisition, as an example, or along a specific product line. This is the beauty of taking this approach. You have standard terms relative to the job to be done of each stage. And then you use the percentage to help improve forecasting based on the likelihood of that customer turning into, or prospect turning into a customer based on where they are at that stage level. The reason this works is if I've got 10 deals, let's say I have 10 deals at 200K each. So I've got 2 million in pipeline. Of those 10 deals, 5 of them are in validation. So I'm forecasting 50K on the 5 that are in validation. 3 of them are at client confirmed fit, 50%. I'm forecasting 300K at that stage. And 2 of them are at proposal approved, 200K, 80%, 160K. My math might be off, but let's just say that the 2 at 160K, so that's 320. So now on the 2 million, I've currently got 620 plus 50K that I'm forecasting on that. So I'd be forecasting on the 2 million, I'd be forecasting 670K. That's coverage of pipeline versus forecast. So total pipeline 2 million, forecast 670K. Then the next question is, what's our timing? And we went into that earlier in the video. I hope this add-on helped. What we've got to understand is that anytime that a sales team member is working with a customer in any of these stages and they're working with customers, things will change. That's why I talk about this in the context of Chutes and Ladder. We'll go from proposal approved to a new person brought in, and now we actually have to bring it all the way back to qualified or validation. And then we work through those stages again. We might be at client confirmed fit and go back and forth with this as we're bringing new people into it. So be comfortable with the idea that the stages are going to change. You'll go back and forth in stage. Timelines are going to push out or get pulled forward, and amounts are going to increase or decrease. If everybody understands the mechanics of the forecasting, then they'll start to be more comfortable in the way that they communicate with you and they communicate with their team, and you'll be able to set better expectations in your organization. I use this to get really, really good at forecasting with teams that had total sales of just north of $85 million. So, and I got really good in a given quarter and for a given year by taking this kind of approach. The thing that I changed in the last couple of years is using past tense, which has helped me get better at forecasting even at those smaller numbers when we're talking about much smaller team numbers inside organizations. Think about the time that it takes for a deal to go through. Think about the time that you've got laid out there for when a customer expects to close the business. Think about the stage and where things are, probability of sale, and you will get better at forecasting inside your organization, whether we're talking about new customer acquisition, retention, so renewals, or expansion opportunities. I guarantee it. This stuff works because it works. You got to trust the process as you go through it. I hope that helps you get better at forecasting. Other questions that typically come up when I was looking at the original video and said, hey, what did I miss? The first big one was the importance of setting expectations with the team. Forecasting and missing is not good, whether you miss high or you miss low. Missing high puts yourself into a situation where your fulfillment team might not have the right capacity to be able to support all the work that you're delivering. So now you run into this tension of the organization not being able to operationally support the clients that you're bringing on. Missing low gets you into a situation where you've got too many people inside the business and you might end up having to let people go. Forecasting is not one of those things where you want to beat people up for being too far off of their forecast. What you want to do is create the flexibility. What I want to do inside organizations is create the flexibility of people being able to understand, look, the forecast is going to continue to move. Let's figure out ways where we can have a rolling forecast over a longer period of time and start to predict where we're going from a growth perspective or where things are potentially going to stall. That's why these are the three numbers I like to look at. Short term, which is the next 90 days. This is where we should be really accurate, like dialed in. Medium term, which is the year. What are we forecasting for the fiscal year or calendar year? That's kind of the do I get to keep my job type stuff. And then long term, which is this 90 plus 270. At the beginning of the year, your existing year is going to be part of the long term, but now what ends up happening is you start to get the team to start thinking a little bit differently about how they're planning for their forecast for the following year. How are we setting up for 2026 by the midpoint of 2025? Because our plan is that we're all going to be here. That's the deep dive on forecasting. If you have questions, I am happy to answer them. If you know somebody who would find this valuable, please share it with them. And if you think I missed on something, please let me know. It's just simple stuff. It's like date, when do we think it's going to happen? Amount, what's the total amount? And then stage, so we understand probability of sale. And if we know those things, good things will happen. This is why I don't like words like commit or best case or any of that other kind of crap. It's all just, actually, if you follow this process, all that other stuff is just bullshit. Thanks.